The cattle baron believed his wife drowned, until twin girls called him Papa at the gate. The gate latch had a sound to it. I know that's a strange place to start, but bear with me. Wrought iron, hand-forged, and the pin that held it was loose, had been loose going on 4 years. Every time the wind picked up from the southeast, the way it does in September, that pin would rattle against the post. 3 short taps, pause, then 2 more, like a hand knocking. 4 years I'd been hearing that sound in the night, and waking up with my chest in my throat. 4 years of getting out of bed, walking to the window, looking out at the dark yard, seeing nothing, going back to bed, and lying there staring at the ceiling until the sky went gray. You do that enough times, you stop sleeping the way a man should sleep. You start sleeping like an animal that's expecting something, one ear always up. My foreman, Dix Calloway, used to say I'd turned into the loneliest piece of furniture he'd ever seen. A man with a big house and no one in it. He meant it gently. Dix was like that, rough on the outside, careful on the inside. He'd pour you a second cup of coffee before you knew you wanted one, and never say a word about it. My name is Emmett Hargrove. I run cattle on 32 sections in the eastern part of the territory, dry grass country, hard pan in the summer, knee-deep mud in the spring. The ranch is called the Anchor Cross. My father built the house. I built the rest of it, every fence post, every outbuilding, every cistern and stock tank and mile of wire. My wife's name was Clara. I say was, because that's what I believed for 4 years. The Murrumbidgee River took her on a Tuesday in May. We'd been in New South Wales 6 months. I was there on a long contract providing cattle work to a station owner named Broward who'd lost most of his drovers to the gold fields. Clara had come with me. She wanted to see the country. That was Clara. She'd been raised in Laramie, the daughter of a schoolteacher, and she had a mind that was always reaching toward something new. New plants, new birds, new ways a river bent around rock. She was 4 months along when we left Wyoming. I didn't know that yet. She knew, but she hadn't told me. She said later she'd been waiting to be sure. She never got the chance to tell me. The river flooded without much warning the way rivers do in that country. A rain event 300 miles north and you get a wall of water where the sky was clear all day. She was downstream of the camp, sketching. A habit of hers, she kept a leather journal and she drew things in it. Bird skulls, seed pods, the particular way a windmill threw shadow at dusk. By the time I heard the water coming and ran, there was nothing to run to. I searched for 2 weeks. Broward's men helped. We found her journal downstream, wedged in a fork of a dead tree, soaked through. The pages mostly gone. I still have the leather cover. It's in the bottom drawer of the bureau in the room I haven't slept in for 4 years. A man from the local constabulary wrote in his report, "No body recovered, presumed drowned." 5 words that became the whole shape of my life. I came back to the Anchor Cross. I threw myself into the work. There is a kind of grief that only makes sense when your hands are busy. I can tell you that from the inside. You stack fence posts until your shoulders are burning. You ride fence line until the horse is done and you're still not done. You buy more cattle than you need, so there's always something that requires you to be somewhere specific, doing something specific, right now. That's how I put 4 years together, piece by piece, like a man laying flagstone over a hole. The gate latch rattled on windy nights and I lay awake and listened. And in the mornings I got up and ran cattle and came home to a house that smelled like leather and lamp oil and nothing else. The fall of the 4th year was bad from the start. I'd had a dispute with a neighboring outfit man named Torrance, who'd been pushing his fence line into my northeast corner for 3 seasons, slow enough that I'd let it go longer than I should have. When I finally pushed back, Torrance decided to make it personal. He started working the local stockmen's association, telling them the Anchor Cross graded its cattle wrong, which was a lie, but a lie told enough times starts getting traction. I had the better of it legally, and I knew it. But legal rights and a man's reputation are two different things, and I was tired enough that the reputation fight felt heavier than it should have. October came. I rode a lot by myself. The grass had gone amber and the mornings were cold, hard frost on the water troughs by the end of the month. Dix told me I was losing weight. I told him I was fine. He poured me a second cup of coffee and didn't say anything. I was riding the north fence alone on a Thursday, which was 4 years and 5 months after the Murrumbidgee. The day was the color of tin, sky like a pot lid. My horse, an ugly blue roan I called Monday, kept tossing his head at the wind. I thought it was the smell of the coming cold front. I had 6 miles of fence still to check and a headache behind my left eye. That was my life. That was the whole of it. I got back to the ranch house a little before 4 o'clock. The light was already going. Dix was standing at the gate. Not working, just standing. He had his hat in his hands, turning it by the brim, a thing I'd never seen him do. Dix Calloway had been my foreman for 11 years. I had never once seen him turn his hat in his hands. I pulled up Monday and looked at him. He looked up at me and his face was strange. Not sad strange, something else. He said, "Emmett." And then he stepped aside. There were 2 little girls sitting on the porch steps. I couldn't have told you how old they were. I knew nothing about children's ages. I was not a man who'd been around children. Small, old enough to sit still. Old enough to look at a strange man on a horse and not look away. They had dark hair, both of them, cut straight across the front. They were dressed plain, cotton dresses, worn but clean, good sturdy boots that someone had cared for. They sat with their hands in their laps, side by side, and they looked at me. I looked back. One of them, the one on the left, said, "Papa." Not a question, a statement, the way you'd say door or asterisk horse asterisk or asterisk rain, the plainest word in the world used plainly. The other one said it too, a half-second behind, like an echo that had been waiting. Monday shifted under me. I don't remember getting down. I'll be straight with you. My first thought was that I was wrong, that there'd been some confusion. That these were some other man's children, brought to the wrong gate, and that someone was going to come around the corner and explain. That's what I thought for about 40 seconds. Then I crouched down in front of them, there in the dirt by the gate, and I looked at their faces. The one on the left had Clara's jawline, exact, the way a jaw sets forward a little, not stubborn, just certain. The one on the right had the particular way her eyes sat in her face, spaced just slightly wide, which was a thing about Clara I'd always loved because it made her look like she was always a little surprised by the world, interested in it, not jaded. 4 years and 5 months, and I was crouching in the dirt and my hands were shaking. I said, "What are your names?" The left one said, "Nora." The right one said, "Bess." The left one, Nora, tilted her head and said, with the gravity of someone who has been given a piece of information and understood it completely, "Mama's coming. She walked slow today because of her ankle." I stood up. I looked at the road. And there she was. She was a quarter-mile out, walking. The road from the east comes between 2 ridges and drops down through scrub cedar before the gate, and she was at the bottom of the drop in the cedars still, but I could see her. I could see the way she walked. I knew how Clara walked. You live with a woman 2 years, you know how she walks. There is no one else on this earth who moves exactly that way. I had thought for 4 years that I would never see that walk again. I left the girls on the steps. Dix was there, and they didn't seem alarmed. They had the steadiness of children who have learned to wait. And I walked toward the gate, and then I was through the gate, and then I stopped walking because I couldn't feel my legs. She saw me stop. She walked faster, the ankle be damned. Closer, closer, and then she was close enough that I could see her face and she could see mine, and she stopped too. We stood there on the road looking at each other. She looked different. There was more of something in her face, not age exactly, though there was that too, something earned. She'd been through something that had changed the density of her, the way a piece of wood gets denser after it's been wet and dried out and wet again. She was still Clara. She was more than Clara. She said, "Emmett." My name in her mouth again. 4 years. I said, "You're alive." She said, "I'm alive." And then neither of us said anything for a while. We sat at the kitchen table that night for a long time after the girls were asleep. Dix had cleared out diplomatically, murmured something about checking on a sick heifer, which was almost certainly not true, and Clara told me what happened. The flood had taken her fast. She said she didn't remember much of the first few minutes, just water and noise and cold, and the bottom of the river in her face. She'd grabbed for a tree and missed, and grabbed again and caught it, and held on while the flood peaked. 1.5 miles downstream, a family named Anstruther had a holding. The father and his eldest son had seen the flood coming and were watching from high ground when the water brought her past. They pulled her out. She was alive. She was hurt, the ankle which had never healed quite right, and 2 cracked ribs, and a long cut on her forearm that scarred over white. And she was 5 months along instead of 4. The Anstruthers were good people. She stayed with them through the winter. The girls came in July, 2 of them, which no one had expected. She said the old woman, Mrs. Anstruther, had laughed when the second one appeared, laughed from surprise, and that sound had been the first good thing Clara had heard in a long time. I asked her why she hadn't sent word. I didn't ask it sharp. I asked it plain because I needed to know. She looked at her hands. She said, "I tried, twice. The first letter I sent it through Broward Station, and Broward had already packed up and gone, and whoever took the station on didn't know you or me. The second letter I sent to Laramie, to my father, because I thought he'd know how to reach you. He died that winter, Emmett. I didn't know. There was no one left who could tell me where you'd gone." Her father, I hadn't known that either. She said, "I thought about you every day." She said it the same way Nora had said * Papa plainly, not performing it, just the truest true thing stated. "I thought you believed I was dead," she said. "I thought you'd grieved me and moved on. I almost didn't come." She looked at me then. "But I kept thinking these girls have a father, and that man deserves to know his daughters, so I kept coming." I looked at her across the table. 4 years of that gate latch rattling. 4 years of waking with my chest in my throat and going to the window and seeing nothing. I said I didn't move on. She said, "I know, Dix told me." I should tell you about Dix that night, what he'd done before I got back. He'd seen them coming up the road from a distance, the 2 little girls and the woman with the bad ankle. He'd met them at the gate, and Clara had said her name, and Dix, who is not a man given to shows of feeling, who I have seen hold still through things that would break most men, Dix had to turn away for a minute. Then he'd sat the girls on the steps and told them to wait for their father. He'd known I was on the north fence. He'd known roughly when I'd be back. He'd stood at the gate and waited and turned his hat in his hands because he was holding something too big to hold any other way. That's Dix Calloway. That's 11 years of a man I trusted with everything and never had cause to regret it. I told him the next morning that I owed him something. He told me I owed him a new gate latch. The nights were hard in the beginning. I want to be honest about that, because I think the honest version is the only one worth telling. Clara and I had been married 2 years before she disappeared. We knew each other well, but we didn't know each other the way people know each other after 10 years, after a hard patch, after children. We were 30 when we married, and we were still finding the shape of ourselves together when the river took her. She came back a different woman in some ways. Not worse, just different. She'd managed alone for 4 years. She'd raised 2 girls by herself in a country she hadn't chosen, working alongside people she'd come to love out of necessity. She had opinions about how a house should run that she hadn't had before, quiet opinions, practical ones, but opinions. I had opinions too. 4 years of solitude does that. You develop habits, particular ways of doing the small things, where the lamp sits, how coffee is made, when the back door gets latched for the night. We scraped against each other those first weeks, not badly, but honestly. There was a night, maybe 3 weeks in, when I was up late over the accounts, the kind of grinding numbers that you put off because they show you exactly how close to the edge you've been running, and Clara came down. She couldn't sleep either. She sat across from me and didn't say anything, just looked at the papers, and then she said, "Is the Torrance thing going to cost you the northeast corner?" I looked up. She said, "Dick's told me some of it. I want to know the rest." So I told her. The whole of it, the fence creep, the association slander, the legal position I was holding but barely holding, the money I'd spent on a lawyer in the county seat. I told her things I hadn't told anyone because there hadn't been anyone to tell. When I was done, she was quiet for a while. Then she said, "You've got righteous law on your side, Emmett. You've got survey posts and documented dates and 2 neighboring ranchers who'll testify because Torrance has pushed them too. What you don't have is the association's ear, because you've been sitting out here by yourself for 4 years not talking to anyone." I said, "That's true." She said, "I know the wife of the association president, Margaret Aldam. I went to school with her younger sister. Let me write a letter." I looked at her. She met my eyes without flinching. That exact look, that particular directness, was one of the things that had made me love her the first time. I had forgotten how much I'd missed it. I'd forgotten you could miss a thing like that. You think you remember a person's face, their voice. You don't remember the small things, the particular quality of their attention when they've decided to take something seriously. I said, "Write the letter." She wrote it. The Aldams had Margaret over for supper the following week. Torrance's claims were dead in the association by November. Nora and Bess were 5 years old. I had missed 5 years of their lives, but that wasn't their fault, and kids that age don't carry a ledger. They take what's in front of them. What was in front of them was a father, a ranch, a horse named Monday who let them brush him if you held his head still, and a cook named Esperanza who made a cornbread they talked about like it was a religious experience. They were alike and unalike in the way of twins, same face from a certain angle, completely different face from another. Nora was deliberate. She thought about things before she did them. If she picked something up, she had already decided to pick it up. Bess was in motion, always. She was in the middle of the thing before she decided to do it, and she figured out whether it was a good idea while she was already doing it. I am a deliberate man. I took to Nora first, if I'm honest, because she was easier to read. But Bess got under my skin faster, because Bess would climb into your lap without asking and sit there like she'd always been there, and there's not much you can do with that except put your arm around it. By December, I was reading to them after supper on the nights I wasn't out on the range. Nora sat beside me and followed the pages with her finger. Bess sat on my feet. Clara watched from across the room sometimes. I'd look up and find her looking, and she'd look back without looking away, the way she'd always done, and something in that, just that, would put the whole day in order. There's a thing a man doesn't say out loud when he's in the middle of it, because saying it makes it too real. I had believed those 4 years that I was done. Not dead, but done in the way a fire is done when the fuel's gone. Still warm, maybe. Still putting out some heat, but no more wood coming. The house would get colder, and eventually it would be the same temperature as the outside world, and that would just be the truth of it. You can live in that, it's livable. I know because I did it. But a man who's learned to live in that doesn't know what to do when the fuel comes back. He doesn't know what to do with the feeling of the warmth returning. It feels almost like pain at first, that thawing feeling, and you're not sure you trust it. You're not sure it's real. You keep waiting for the cold to come back because the cold has been so reliable. February of that first winter, we had a bad blizzard. The kind that comes straight down out of Canada and means business. I was out with Dix and two hands pushing cattle toward the South Breaks for 3 days, and when I got back the temperature was still below zero and the house was dark except for one window. I came in through the back and Clara was at the kitchen stove, not doing anything dramatic, just feeding wood into it, banking it against the night. The girls were already in bed. The house smelled like the soup she'd made for supper, and the cedar smoke and, faintly, the rose water she used on her hands in dry weather. I stood in the doorway and dripped melt water onto the floor, and she turned around. She looked at me, at the state of me, the ice in my beard and the ridden-through look of me, and she crossed the kitchen and she put both hands on either side of my face. Her hands were warm from the stove. She just held my face in her hands and looked at me. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. That was the moment I believed she was real. 4 months after she came through the gate, and that was when I finally believed it all the way to the bottom. I put my hands over hers, just that. And we stood there in the kitchen while the blizzard worked at the windows, and I could hear Nora turn over in her sleep down the hall, and the stove ticked with heat. That was it, that was the whole of it, that was everything. The Torrance business settled in the spring. He sold his northeast section to a man who wanted to run sheep, which pleased neither of us but was at least peaceful. The anchor cross was solid again, legally, financially, standing. I told Clara, one evening on the porch in March, the first warm evening of the year, the first evening you could sit outside without a coat if you were willing to be a little cold, that I wanted to go back. She looked at me. I said, Australia, I want to find the Anstruther family. I want to thank them properly. Not a letter in person. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, the girls would love it. I said I thought they might. She said I loved it too in the end, in spite of everything, parts of it. I said, I know, you used to talk about the birds. She looked at me like she'd forgotten. I remembered that about her. I remembered everything. The gate latch is fixed. Dix replaced the pin in November. First winter Clara was back. I came out one morning and he was crouched at the gate with a new iron pin and his toolbox, and he fitted it in without ceremony and stood up and tested it, solid, no rattle, and he looked at me and said, been meaning to do that. I said, I know. He said, you don't need to be woken up anymore. He meant the latch. He was talking about the latch. We both knew he wasn't just talking about the latch. I sleep now, full through, the way I slept when I was young, when I was building this place and the work was big and the days were long and I had every reason to be tired and no reason to be afraid. Nora's going on 11. Bess is on 11 too, obviously 30 seconds behind her sister, same as she's always been. Nora wants to read law. She told me this with complete seriousness at the supper table, and I looked at Clara and Clara looked back at me and I thought, that's her grandfather in her. The schoolteacher's blood. Bess wants to run cattle. She told me this while she was already standing on the bottom rail of the corral, feeding Monday an apple she'd taken from the kitchen without asking. I watched her and I thought, that's me in her. The part that does the thing before it's decided. Clara teaches them both. Mornings at the table in the front room, the way her father taught her. She has a patience for it I don't have. I can teach a man to work cattle in a day, but I cannot sit across from 2 children and teach them to divide fractions without eventually picking up the pencil and doing it myself. Clara can. She sits there, perfectly still, and waits for them to find it, and when they find it, she says, there it is. And the way she says it makes them feel like they found something real. I watch her do this sometimes, when I'm coming in from outside and I can see through the window. She doesn't know I'm there. She's just herself, the way a person is only fully themselves when they don't think anyone's watching. I watched her that way before the river. I watched her that way after. Some things a man knows without knowing how he knows them. He knows the weight of a good day's work done. He knows the smell of rain on dry dirt before the rain gets there. He knows the difference between a horse that's spooked and a horse that's seen something real. And he knows, if he's paying any kind of attention at all, when he's been given something back that he thought was gone forever. I know what I have. I know what it cost. I know what I would have missed if she hadn't started walking down that road. The frost comes early this year. It's put a hard white edge on everything: the grass, the fence wire, the cedar breaks along the north ridge. Cold morning, clear sky, no wind. The kind of morning that looks like something has been decided. Clara brought coffee out to the porch and we stood there and didn't say much. Nora was inside. Bess was already down at the corral, already talking to Monday, already in the middle of something she'd figure out the logic of later. Clara put her hand on my arm. I looked out at the anchor cross, the land, the fences, the outbuildings I built board by board, the cisterns I sank by hand, everything that was mine to take care of, and I thought about what it means to take care of something, to hold something steady when the weather turns, to still be standing when the cold breaks. It's enough to be good at something. It's more than enough when someone you love knows that you are.